Stand in any garden center in America right now and ask for seeds of the plant that fed Egyptian pharaohs for 4,000 years. Ask for the tuber that produces more calories per acre than wheat. Ask for the crop that survives drought, requires zero fertilizer, and stores for years without refrigeration. Watch the employee look at you like you are insane. Then watch them walk you over to the herbicide aisle and hand you a bottle of poison specifically engineered to kill it. This is not a joke. This is not an exaggeration. There is a food so powerful, so nutritionally complete, that it sustained entire civilizations through famine, war, and siege. And today, the United States Department of Agriculture has spent millions of dollars researching how to eradicate it from existence. They call it Yellow Nutsedge. They classify it as one of the world's worst agricultural weeds. They publish technical bulletins teaching farmers to spray it, burn it, and bury it under plastic tarps. But here is what they will never tell you in those bulletins. Before it was a weed, it was worshipped. Before it was poisoned, it was planted in royal gardens. And the reason they turned a superfood into public enemy number one has nothing to do with agriculture and everything to do with who profits when you cannot feed yourself. This is Chufa. And if you learn what I am about to show you, you will never look at a weed the same way again. Welcome to Soil and Secrets. In the early 1900s, archaeologists digging in the tombs of pre-dynastic Egypt made a discovery that shattered every assumption about ancient nutrition. Deep inside burial chambers that had been sealed for over 6,000 years, they found something that did not belong. These were not the golden masks or jeweled artifacts the museums wanted. These were dried tubers, carefully wrapped and placed beside the dead. At first they assumed it was random. Maybe the Egyptians just threw in some leftover food before sealing the tomb. But then they started finding the same tubers everywhere, in tomb after tomb, across dynasties separated by centuries. There they were, small, wrinkled, striped like tiger skin. And when they examined the mummies themselves, when they analyzed the contents of their stomachs, they found these tubers inside. The pharaohs had eaten them as their final meal before death. This was not decoration. This was deliberate. This was sacred. Carbon dating revealed that wild harvests of this plant go back 13,000 years. That is 5,000 years before humans even invented farming. During the last ice age, when woolly mammoths still walked the earth, our ancestors were already gathering these tubers and relying on them to survive. By 3000 BC, this plant had become one of the 3 foundational crops of Egyptian civilization, ranking alongside emmer wheat and barley. Wall paintings inside the tomb of Rekhmire, the vizier to Pharaoh Thutmose III, show workers measuring these tubers, grinding them with pestles, mixing them with honey, and shaping the mixture into sacred cakes for the god Amun. The Greeks called it by name. The Romans traded it across the empire. For thousands of years it was everywhere. It was medicine. It was food. It was currency. And then it vanished. What happened? Did the plant go extinct? Did it stop producing food? No, it is still here. In fact, it grows so aggressively that modern farmers cannot kill it, no matter how much poison they use. The plant did not disappear. The knowledge disappeared. And it disappeared for one simple reason. You cannot make money from a plant that feeds people without asking for help. Let me show you what Chufa actually is, because once you see the biology, you will understand why the chemical companies had to destroy it. Chufa is not a nut. The name tiger nut is marketing. It is a tuber, an underground storage organ, like a tiny potato. The plant itself is a sedge, the same family that gave us papyrus. It grows in wet soils, in marshes, in conditions where your precious tomatoes would rot into slime. Each plant sends out a network of underground runners, and at the tips of those runners it forms tubers. Not one or two, hundreds. A single plant can produce up to 2,000 tubers in one season. Each tuber is about the size of a chickpea, with a striped skin that looks like a tiger. When you bite into one, it tastes like a cross between an almond and a coconut. Sweet, nutty, rich. The Egyptians ate them raw. They roasted them over fires. They boiled them in beer. They ground them into flour and mixed them with honey to make cakes. The Spanish turned them into horchata, a cold, milky drink that has been produced in Valencia for 700 years. But taste is not why this plant survived 6,000 years. Storage is. Here is the secret that makes Chufa more valuable than gold in a collapse. You can harvest a basket of Chufa tubers in November, spread them out in the sun for a week, and once they dry, they will last indefinitely. Not months, not years, indefinitely. No canning, no freezing, no vacuum sealing, just air. And when you are ready to eat them, you drop them in water for a few hours. They swell back to full size, as if you just pulled them from the ground. You can eat them, or you can plant them. That regenerative cycle, that refusal to die, is what made Chufa the ultimate survival technology. The Egyptians could harvest in November, store through winter, and still have food security through famine, drought, and siege. They were not gambling on next year's wheat crop. They were holding years of nutrition in a clay jar. That is power. That is independence. And independence is exactly what the industrial food system cannot tolerate. Now let us talk about what is inside these tubers, because this is where the suppression becomes criminal. Chufa contains up to 10% protein. That is comparable to many grains. But unlike most plant proteins, Chufa is a complete protein. It contains all 9 essential amino acids. You do not need to combine it with rice or beans to survive. It is muscle fuel, pure and simple. The fat content is high, but it is the same healthy fat found in olive oil, oleic acid. Researchers have studied Chufa as a biodiesel crop because the oil yield is so high. The carbohydrate content is primarily resistant starch. This is the kind of starch that feeds your gut bacteria instead of spiking your blood sugar. You get sustained energy without the crash. Chufa has twice the starch content of potatoes, but with a lower glycemic impact. The fiber content is nearly 4 times higher than standard fiber sources. It promotes gut health in ways the Egyptians understood intuitively 6,000 years ago. It is also loaded with minerals: calcium, magnesium, iron, potassium. It is naturally gluten-free, dairy-free, allergen-friendly. You can grind it into flour. You can blend it into milk. You can roast it for snacks. Or you can eat it raw, straight from the dirt. So here is the question nobody in the agricultural industry wants to answer. If this tuber is nutritionally superior to most cultivated crops, if it has been sustaining civilizations for 6,000 years, if it requires no fertilizer and survives drought, why is it not in every garden? Why are we planting corn and soybeans instead? The answer is simple, brutal, and reveals everything about who controls what we eat. Chufa cannot be controlled, and the moment it escaped into the wild, they declared war on it. The plant that fed pharaohs is now officially classified as one of the world's worst agricultural weeds. Not a minor problem, one of the absolute worst. The United States Department of Agriculture published Technical Bulletin number 1197 specifically about yellow nutsedge, calling it a menace to the Corn Belt. The USDA dedicated federal resources, taxpayer money, to studying how to kill a plant that fed ancient Egypt. Why? Because yellow nutsedge spreads through underground tubers that regenerate even after the visible plant is destroyed. One plant can produce 2,000 tubers. Each tuber can survive in the soil for 10 years, waiting. You can mow it, plow it, burn it, and it will come back. That regenerative capacity, that resilience, that refusal to die is exactly what made it valuable for 6,000 years. But for industrial agriculture, which demands monocultures of patented seeds that must be purchased annually, Chufa is a nightmare. So they created an arsenal to kill it. Glyphosate, halosulfuron, sulfentrazone, bentazone. An entire pharmacopoeia of poisons engineered specifically to stop Chufa from growing. Research papers admit that single applications often fail. They recommend sequential treatments year after year just to achieve 90% control. That is the real threat. Not that Chufa competes with crops, but that Chufa reveals how fragile industrial agriculture actually is. Our commodity crops require perfect conditions, constant inputs, chemical protection, massive infrastructure. Chufa requires none of that. In Spain, where they still cultivate it legally for horchata, yields range from 4 to 6 tons per acre. Compare that to wheat, which averages 3 tons per acre with intense chemical management. Even on poor soils, wild Chufa yields hundreds of pounds of nutrient-dense food with zero inputs. And because the tubers store indefinitely, there is no waste. But here is what industrial agriculture cannot tolerate. You cannot patent Chufa. It has been cultivated for 6,000 years. It is public domain. You cannot sell herbicides for a crop that outcompetes weeds naturally. You cannot sell fertilizer for a crop that grows in terrible soil. You cannot sell expensive equipment for a harvest that is done by hand. You cannot create dependency when farmers can save their own tubers and replant them indefinitely. The entire economic model of industrial agriculture requires crops that need constant inputs. Chufa represents everything that model opposes. It is free. It is resilient. It perpetuates itself. And therefore, it had to be classified as a weed, demonized, and systematically poisoned. Extension bulletins warn that yellow nutsedge becomes invasive, but they will not acknowledge that invasive just means successful. A plant that thrives without help is exactly what sustainable agriculture should look like. Instead, they teach farmers to see abundance as a problem requiring chemical solutions. And who benefits from this? Chemical companies selling herbicides. Seed companies selling patented varieties that die after one season. Fertilizer manufacturers. Equipment manufacturers. They cannot make money from Chufa. So Chufa had to disappear from the cultural memory. They convinced everyone it is worthless, a pest, something to pour poison on. But knowledge does not die. It just waits. In Valencia, Spain, Chufa cultivation continues. Over 8,000 tons are produced annually for horchata. The regulating council protects the heritage. That is 6,000 years of continuous tradition. In Africa, the Hausa people still cultivate Chufa as a food crop. They trade it in markets across Nigeria and Mali. The knowledge survived colonialism. It survived the Green Revolution. It survived the herbicide campaigns. And now it is coming back. In the last decade, Chufa has started appearing in health food stores as tiger nuts. The paleo community discovered them. The gluten-free community discovered them. Researchers are studying Chufa flour as a wheat alternative. Others are exploring it for biodiesel because the oil content is so high. But notice what is not happening. No major agricultural university is promoting Chufa as a staple crop. No government agency is funding large-scale Chufa research for food security. They are still publishing bulletins on how to kill it. The infrastructure remains dedicated to suppression. The herbicide industry continues profiting from its destruction. The narrative remains unchanged. Chufa is a weed, not food. A pest, not a resource. But the plant survives. Despite the herbicides, despite the propaganda, despite being classified as one of the worst weeds on earth, Chufa still grows wherever conditions allow. It still produces tubers. It still offers the same nutrition that built pyramids. And every person who learns that the weed they have been poisoning is actually food from a pharaoh's tomb becomes harder to control. Every farmer who discovers Chufa produces more nutrition per acre than wheat, represents lost profit for the chemical companies. Every garden where Chufa thrives without inputs is proof that the industrial narrative is a lie. They classified it as a weed because they could not patent it. They created herbicides to kill it because they could not commodify it. They convinced everyone it is worthless because its value undermines their entire economic model. But 6,000 years of human history tells a different story. Now, before you run outside and start digging up every patch of nutsedge in your yard, you need to understand something critical. There are multiple species of nutsedge. Yellow nutsedge, Cyperus esculentus, is the edible one. Purple nutsedge is not. You need to learn to identify the difference. Yellow nutsedge has yellowish-brown tubers. Purple nutsedge has dark tubers and tastes bitter. The leaves are also slightly different. Study them. Learn them. Do not guess. Once you confirm you have yellow nutsedge, the harvest is simple. Wait until late fall when the plant has stored maximum energy in the tubers. Dig carefully around the base. You are not looking for the plant. You are looking for the runners spreading underground. Follow those runners. Pull gently. Each one will have tubers attached like beads on a string. Collect them in a bucket. Rinse them thoroughly. Spread them in a single layer in the sun for a week. Once they are dry and hard, they are done. Store them in a jar. They will outlast you. To eat them, soak a handful overnight. They will soften and swell. You can eat them raw, roast them like nuts, or blend them with water to make horchata. The Spanish recipe is simple. Soak the tubers for 24 hours, blend them with water and a little sugar. Strain through cheesecloth. What you get is a creamy, sweet, nutty milk that does not come from an animal. No cow, no factory. Just dirt and water and 6,000 years of human wisdom. This is the plant they do not want you to remember. This is the food they reclassified as a crime against monoculture. But you cannot unlearn this. You cannot unsee what Chufa represents. A plant that feeds people without permission, without patents, without profit for anyone except the person holding the tuber. The pharaohs knew. The agricultural departments definitely know. And now, you know. Chufa is still here, still growing, still offering 6,000 years of nutrition to anyone willing to look past the lies. If this knowledge unlocked something for you, subscribe to Soil and Secrets. Hit the bell. Every like, every share preserves this wisdom for the next person who refuses to be controlled. The secrets are still in the soil. You just have to dig.